and thank you for coming. We're going to go through a brief tutorial on all this touchscreen technology before we get started. And these touchscreens, we load the agendas onto the touchscreens, and they are touch sensitive. So if there are documents attached to this, which there are 2 documents attached to this, which you can see down on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, which is the NRC's ordinance and the NRC's resolution. You can touch any item on the agenda with your fingertip, and if there is something that is going to come up as a document on that item, you can then touch the document, which is shown by a little page, and hit document, and it will pop up on your screen. And once that pops up on your screen, there's a slidey bar, I call it a sliding bar, on the right-hand side of the screen. If you click, you put your finger on that and drag up and down to move through the document.
Okay.
And then you can close that document and go back to the agenda. And when I click on, I have a meeting controller screen over here, and when I click on an agenda item, that means that the chair has moved on to that item. And so as the chair moves the meeting forward, I will click on each of these items so that when we have minutes in the future, it'll be time-stamped and everything. It's a pretty neat system. It takes a little bit of getting used to, which is why at our next meeting, Nancy Ive, the city recorder, or Kelly, her assistant, will go through a complete tutorial on how to use this stuff with us. They're also going to talk about how to, there's a booklet for guidance for all advisory committees, which you'll get a copy of prior to the next meeting. And let's see. I'm going to, until we get to agenda item 4, I'm going to kind of just move us through agenda items 1, 2, and then 3. So for the first thing I'm going to do, unless you have any questions at this point, you can ask me any question at any time. First thing I'm going to do is take a roll call for everybody. So Richard Craven, are you here?
Here.
Brian Boyce.
Here.
Gerald Herman.
Here.
Marlo Smith.
Here.
Andrew Sinise. Not here. Bob Roth.
Here.
Eric Carr.
Here.
So we have 6 members in attendance of our 7-member committee. A quorum for the committee is 4. Under our bylaws, we need a majority of committee members who are present to make consensus decisions. But if we are making a vote, if there's a motion for a vote, we need a quorum, and in order to make a vote on motions. And I was going to go through our bylaws at the end of this so that we can kind of move through them and talk about the bylaws more specifically that we have on the books, because those have been adopted for some time. The NRC can amend their bylaws if you have a majority of members who want to do that, and you'd send those up to the City Commission for approval. So the next item on the agenda is public comment on items not listed on the agenda. So in the future, we will probably be having people attending our meetings to hear meetings, or coming to make recommendations or comments to the NRC that may have relevance to your scope of work and future work plans and things like that. And so any member of the public can come and speak for 3 minutes. Neighborhood associations who are speaking on items can get a little more time. It's up to the chair to control the timing of those. So depending on how many people come, you can let them run over 3 minutes. That's just a general rule. But it's just in order to move these meetings forward. That's sort of rule. So any comments on this so far? Okay. Next item is introductions. So we all get to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and our interest on the committee. So I'll start if you don't mind. My name is Pete. I've been working for the city for 6 years. I've been a planner for about 10 years. I worked in Colorado prior to coming to Oregon. And I got my planning degree at University of Oregon. That's my master's. And then before that, I worked in natural resources. I was in the Peace Corps as an active forces volunteer in Ecuador from 96 to 98. And prior to that, I worked as a forester and as a land use specialist for a mine reclamation arm of a mining company in Colorado.
Lost your mic.
Really? Oh. 1 second. This happens. Can you hear it now? Well,
You hear it in here?
do you guys hear anything?
I can't hear myself, but
Hitting that audio.
That
Hello?
hold that up.
Yeah. Testing.
yeah,
There
there you go.
Thank you.
All right. I'll scoot it. And so I got out of natural resources management and got into urban planning. And I'm very excited to be able to work with a committee who's focused on natural resources in Oregon City. My job here is to assist you all and provide information, and I will do the best I can to provide that for you. Thanks. Look
Okay.
forward to working with you all.
My name is Eric Carr. I'm the Urban and Community Conservation Specialist at Clackamas County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'm fairly recent to the position. I've just joined up with the district here in the last month. Prior to, well, I should say my position at the district provide technical assistance and project management for low-impact development projects such as rain gardens or hopefully some green roof projects, hedgerow habitat creation projects in the city, and also maybe working in some riparian restoration, all in the urban areas within Clackamas County. Prior to this position, I was working as a landscape designer. My background, I have a master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Oregon, and I've also worked with the water quality program at the city of Lake Oswego, and I guess my primary interest, I have an arborist certification, so my primary interest would be in urban forestry and any other types of low-impact development projects that I think could overlap with my job at the district. So, thanks.
I'm Brian Boyce. I'm been involved in environmental things over the years. Right now I'm employed doing support for iPhones. I'm currently the chair-elect for the Clackamas River Basin Council and will be chair starting in January there. I'm also active in the Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force, which recently started. And one thing I've learned, especially at the Basin Council and the Habitat Task Force, is that working together with people gets a lot more done.
Okay.
My name is Marlo Smith. I'm a current student at Portland State University studying political science. I've also been involved through Clackamas Community College in getting things started, such as the Students' Sustainability Initiative, and working with, well, when I can volunteer and I have the time, different groups for sustainability purposes. And that's my main reason for wanting to be here, is to help push forward things in that arena in Oregon City since I live here.
I'm Richard Craven, resident of Oregon City for the last 15 years, basically, and been in the environmental consulting business for the last 40 years, mostly in the Pacific Northwest, working on fisheries issues, wildlife issues, and environmental problems of various types. I'm mostly retired at this point. I still work on a project a year or two, maybe 2 projects, and I do a lot of volunteer work in mediation and also in alternative dispute resolution with FERC.
Bob Roth, got a BA and MA in political science, focusing on environmental public policy. Out this way, back in the 80s, are looking to build a dam up on the headwaters of the Tualatin River up near Cherry Grove, the Gaston area, and we formed a Patton Valley Coalition, which is a broad-based community coalition of individuals, and we were able to kind of mobilize a broad array of stakeholders to go ahead and defeat the dam and preserve Patton Valley, in contrast to what happened in the adjacent valley, Scoggins Valley, where Hague Lake is located. And based on that experience, I was hired, and I was the first Johnson Creek Watershed Council coordinator for about 4 years. We did things like the Crystal Springs East Warren Golf Course restoration project up there, restoring habitat, and after that position, also did the watershed-wide events in the Johnson Creek summits with Congressman Blumenauer's office. And after that, went down and did a stretch down at the Salem-Keizer Watershed Councils, where I was involved with 4 different councils in Marion and Polk counties. And after a stretch after that, volunteer coordination up with the city of Tigard. And I'm kind of here tonight because there was a saying a while back, think globally, act locally. Amen. And what I was kind of passing out, it was kind of interesting, is, obviously we're focusing on Oregon City issues, but Oregon City being part of a larger globe and things, there's some really significant threats and opportunities in regards to climate change. And what I'm trying to do is see what kind of opportunities are there to, reduce the impacts of climate change with city actions and efforts, and what can we do when we can't avoid the climate change impacts to adapt and try to preserve robust economies and environments at the same time.
My name is Jerry Herman. I run what's called the River Resource Museum Earth Crusaders At-Risk Youth program. I work with at-risk youth, training them to be environmental landscapers. I ran and oversaw the Environmental Learning Center for 23 years of my life up at Clackamas Community College, and I was on the previous Natural Resource Committee here in Oregon City. And I found it very interesting what my associate here was saying, because we brought Dr. Gerald Varney to Oregon City many years ago, who did the Global 2000 report, and that's where that adage came from: think globally, act locally. He was an Oregon City resident, no less. So, thank you.
It's good to have you back, too, Richard, and welcome to all the new members.
Amen.
So the NRC had kind of a 3-year hiatus, and it was a goal of the City Commission to reinvigorate and reform this committee. So they are very excited that we have a fully staffed committee as well. Under our bylaws, we have various fairly specific items, and the next item on the agenda has to do with election of officers. So if you want to go to if you want to jump ahead and look at the NRC resolution, signed final on your screen, and scroll down
Where is it?
to Article 5, which is actually starts on page, let's see, it starts on page 3, bottom of page 3.
Okay.
And let me know if you can't find it. I'll come over and find it on your screen for you.
Here we go.
How did you do that? Sorry.
Basically, just kind of put
I got
a
it,
finger
bro.
on there.
Oh, I
I
see.
can't really stick it on there.
Okay.
So this article says that at the first, let's see, nominations and elections of new officers shall be taken from the floor at the committee's first meeting of each calendar year. So we used to do this in January, but this is technically our first meeting of the calendar year. It's up to the committee whether you feel ready to do this at this meeting or whether you want to table this until the first of the year. what's the committee's feeling about this article, this agenda? Are you guys ready to discuss this in more detail and come up with some nominations now?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What would be kind of the functional impact, since we've just kind of getting to know each other,
Right.
just met,
Yeah.
of postponing this a little bit? I'm just, if, I'm just trying to assess, what would be the impact, to, I won't say rush into it, but
Right.
to jump into it or something like that.
Yeah.
If we do postpone it for a meeting too, is there a real impact?
No problem at all. My initial feeling about this first meeting would be that we would get to know each other and start to work together as a group, and then our relative desires or strengths for who wants to play a role as an officer will come out, at this meeting as well. So if the committee feels it wants to table this until a future meeting, once we've had a discussion about our future meeting dates as well, which is also on the agenda, that is fine. We have 3 officers. We have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And those are 1-year terms, so we would make, you can be reelected as well every year. In the past, it was the chair's job to kind of run the meeting and take the consensus of the group on decision making, call for motions, call for votes if those are necessary, and then the vice chair would serve in their absence. The secretary is responsible for taking minutes, although now that we have this new system, our minutes are generated pretty much automatically. We have a person assigned to do those. Because we have the web streaming, which is everything is verbatim, and we have a video. By law, our web streaming and the audio and video recording serves as adequate meeting minutes. So if we have a written rudimentary set of minutes that kind of follows along with our agenda after the fact, but those do need to be approved by the NRC at subsequent meetings, and I'll bring those forward to you.
Okay, so since sounds like the minutes could fairly well be handled by staff from those recordings, it would
I
be
think-
probably more accurate than doing it in the meeting.
Yeah, we kind of work in collaboration with your secretary, and if the secretary's like, well, you forgot to include this, that, or the other, then staff would revise them accordingly, and then we'd bring them forward to the NRC for final approval. Yeah. So, we can still have those officers, and we'll just do it a little bit differently. So that would take care of that. So then, in the event that an officer can't complete their term, we'll have a special election at that point of time to fill their position. Now, let's see. And this talks about my role. We provide staff report for, it states here, meeting notification, word processing, copying, and information gathering to the extent the city budget permits. So the overviews of code, explanations of existing policy, staff suggestions on future policy changes, those things are all within my purview to provide to you as your staff liaison. So where are we? So I'll take it we'll add this to our next agenda. Does everybody feel pretty good about that? I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay.
Is this the only way we can get to know each other? I'm on one end and he's on the other.
No, I was about to suggest that we, probably do something outside of this formal meeting arena as well, just to get to know each other. And what's your thinking about that?
Well, I just feel like, I feel like this is a very formal setting,
Uh-huh.
and I think it doesn't allow us to learn anything about each other.
Right.
I don't know what we could do. go have pizza together, like
Sure.
we used to do up there at the lunchroom. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I also, just for clarity, this is the format that we are to conduct our meetings, in this
This
format.
is the required format for all advisory committee meetings, Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah, and the formality of this meeting is intended to provide a venue not only for the NRC to make decisions and advisory decisions to the City Commission, Planning Commission, and staff, but also to provide a venue for the public to know about these meetings a week in advance and provide, and be here to hear the meeting, comment on the meeting, and that sort of thing. So as a formal advisory committee to the City Commission, this is the venue. And Nancy will provide a little bit more overview for that. And so I agree with you that it's a formal setting, but this is the official setting for the NRC. Informal meetings outside of this, great. I think we can do it to the extent that those are social gatherings, and if you're going to be discussing policy changes and sorts of things that require consensus-making, decision-making, then we need to be careful about how we notice those meetings, because those are technically public meetings if there are enough members present to make a consensus decision. I can provide a little more legal background on that. And it's also part of the overview that Nancy Ide, the city recorder, will be providing to you. It's the same information that's given to all of the advisory committees. And we'll cover that in detail at the next meeting.
Well, I would certainly like to see us have some type of a setting where we can get to know each other a little bit and find out who has the, time and effort. I mean, if we're going to nominate somebody today, I think it'd be kind of foolish, because I'm not sure who's who and what resources we have here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would sure like to see us do something before the first of the year.
Pete, too, I'm wondering, since not everybody who was appointed is here tonight, is there some way, I guess, to query people who aren't here about their availability? Because if we pick a different meeting time and day and stuff, and not everybody's available to provide their input, they might not be able to attend that other time as well.
Yeah, I think what we can do with regard to Jerry's suggestion is once we decide on a time and a place, we let the public know so that they can be there if they want to.
Sure.
That normally has to provide about a week's notice in that regard. But I will check with the city attorney and make sure that that is sufficient. But I'm sure that we can do that sort of thing outside of the meeting chambers.
We do have a phone number and email for the missing member, and
Right.
should be no problem to contact him.
Yeah.
Pete, with the, for the election of officers, is there any reason we can't put this off until January or February? December is going to be difficult.
Yeah, Denver's a tough time. I
Yeah.
agree.
I would assume
Plus
we're not
our-
meeting.
Plus
Yeah, I
our
was going
additional
to poll
member.
you because that's the next item on our agenda is future meeting times and those kinds of things. So let's talk about that.
Well, basically the thing I was trying to do is, I assume we want as full participation and attendance at the meetings as possible. So maybe we could pick a meeting date, assuming people want to meet in December. But what is the member who's not here tonight?
Andrew?
Andy, check with Andy. Hopefully, he can make, if we pick an alternative date and time,
Yeah,
he can make that time.
yeah. I looked at the city commission, the city calendar, and it appears that there's some time slots in both the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month that are available for this chamber. I'll be able to. Has anybody any suggestions about this? Or any strong feelings?
Well, are you saying that then the only time this chamber is available is the second or fourth Tuesday?
Well, the third Thursday, which was our original suggestion as staff. The third Thursday was, and
There's
then
no
somebody
other-
had a conflict on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the, being chair of the Basin Council, and they have always met that day.
Mhm.
Since before I was there.
Yeah. How about the rest of you, Eric?
I just have a lot of things I do the first part of the month. The latter part is better for me, like the fourth Tuesday, if that's what you're suggesting. But
Is there any open days outside of Tuesdays or Thursdays?
Well, let's see, the Planning Commission meets on the second and fourth Monday in this chamber. The City Commission meets on the the first and third Wednesdays. We have PrAC in here. We have, so that's Parks and Rec. So they all, we have the Citizen Involvement Committee that meets in here. If you look at the city website has all the advisory committee times on it. It sounds like,
But no Wednesdays are available. I think I heard you say first and third for the, whatever, for the city council. Is there any Wednesdays open? I just wondered.
I'm going to look real quick.
Okay.
And, I'll have to run these by the city recorder to make sure.
Sure.
What about times different than 7 o'clock?
Yes.
We can meet earlier than 7, and if we meet earlier than 7, staff will provide food.
That's good.
So 6, if that works better for people.
Pete, the only question I guess I have is I don't know how far people come in for commuting or weather or that kind of stuff. I'm just thinking sometimes, I don't know if people have any meeting. At 6:30 at least gives some leeway. People have commitments or have to do stuff on the way home from work, or you're getting stuck in traffic or something of that sort.
What are people's commutes like?
I'm just coming from up on top of the hill,
Yeah.
so I guess I would prefer a little bit earlier than 7 o'clock.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
If it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm committed until 6:30. That would be the point I could leave to get here is at 6:30. So
My house is probably 2.5 miles from here, so it's not a big thing, and only have to jog over 1 block from the street that I start on, so pretty easy to get here for me. But I do work, and I have an indefinite quit time. 6 would be the earliest I'd want to come, because even at that, on rare occasions, I might be a little late.
One moment here, our computer's kind of slow, but it's coming.
Yeah, the only Thursday I have available is the first Thursday, but I have the whole day off, so.
Pete, can I make maybe one suggestion? I'm wondering is, assuming people want to meet in December, I'm wondering if we maybe want to pick a date, because of holidays and families and stuff going on. I'm wondering if we might want to try make sure have one date that everybody's available in December, even if that date's different than the final date and time we settle on. Because it should be like cleaner in January than December.
Before they get to know each other, get acquainted night, is that what you're saying?
Well, I was thinking even just a regular meeting. I'm not sure.
I'm looking at January 1st, not January the 1st. I'm going to look at the month of January right now, and I have it open. We have the second Tuesdays. Looks like the second Thursday is available.
Second. The only Thursday of the month I have available is the 1st. All the other ones, I already have meetings.
Are you looking at Wednesdays too?
Aren't those city council?
Well, not every,
City council.
alternating.
Wednesday's a tough one.
What kind of conflicts should we have on Tuesday?
It would have to be later in the evening for me. Sure. I could only get here by
We have
7.
a traffic advisory committee meeting on the 3rd Tuesday. And historic review board on the 4th Tuesday.
Hmm.
But they, let's see, 3, 10, 17. Yeah. Historic review board is meets at 6 o'clock on the 4th Tuesday of the month in January. So the 2nd Tuesday and possibly the 2nd Monday or the 3rd Thursday.
But Wednesdays are not available?
Generally, the 2nd and 4th, sorry, the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month are city commission
Right.
meetings. Let's see.
Pete, can you tell from your calendar? Because sometimes second Mondays are, you have Monday holiday acts, and a lot of things are closed.
Yeah.
Like what, President's Day or whatever.
Well, yeah, some of those we'll just have to work around as we go forward. So,
Does it seem, I know some people would like to start early, but does it seem like 7 o'clock on the second Tuesdays work for everybody?
people make that.
Was there no
I'm
availability
still
on
waiting
the
for an
second
answer
Monday?
about Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm
Wanna
going to
know.
look forward to
Yeah.
February, Jerry, and
Yeah.
see, because by then the schedule mellows out a little
Okay.
bit. February now, let's see, city commission.
My brother-in-law was actually on the intergovernmental committee. Did you see the 60 Minutes?
One second. There's a library board meeting on the 2nd Wednesday. Yeah, and that's at 4:30, so they may be done by the time we need to meet.
What day is that of the week?
Second Wednesday?
Wednesday, okay, yeah. Is that, Marlo, for you, is that a time you get here quicker?
Fridays are definitely open for me.
Yeah. I could, I'm very close by too. I'd rather start this meeting earlier, if there's any way we could.
I just have to commute in from Portland.
Does that still affect you on Wednesday?
As long as we didn't meet earlier than 4 o'clock.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, there's,
I prefer not to meet on Friday nights.
let me just check a few more things here. I don't want to
All right.
steer you wrong. This computer's really slow. So I'll need to run this by the library board and make sure that, it's not going to be a conflict for them. If they go longer than an hour and a half, then and if we want to meet, what are we talking about, 7?
That's Wednesday we're talking about now?
Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought we could do 6:30 on Wednesday,
6
couldn't
or
we?
6:30.
Yeah. If that was a day we could meet even earlier, it doesn't bother me. Unless it's a big issue. Or is that an issue for you, Brian? I can't
No,
remember.
Wednesdays shouldn't be like Monday through Wednesday. It shouldn't be any earlier than 5:30 or 6.
Okay.
But
So,
the problem in that
So
one
section-
day is the other committee that's meeting.
right. The other committee.
On
Yeah.
the second Wednesday?
Yeah, second Wednesday,
But if we met at 6:30, that would definitely be clear by
Yeah.
then, right?
Really.
most likely, unless
Yeah.
they run over 2 hours.
Just kick them out. Okay.
I'm going to need to, I think probably what we ought to do is hash this out via email, because there's work sessions of the city commission which aren't on this calendar that I'm looking at as well, and I want to make sure that we're not in conflict with those because the work sessions are here. Yeah.
Do we,
Yeah. But tentatively, sounds like 6:30 Wednesdays, one choice. Second,
does
I
everybody
would
agree
tr-
to that one, or?
I would really like Wednesdays personally, but I'll do whatever you want. I only have 2 days I can do this, either Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's the only options I have, so, myself, so.
Wednesday, 6:30 works for me. Second Wednesday?
second Wednesday. And then, how do people feel about, what was the feeling about Tuesday again?
As long as it was at 7 for me.
I'm fine with Tuesdays.
Yeah.
7 o'clock Tuesday,
Which Tuesday was that, second?
Second.
Yeah, okay. I could do that.
second
I
Tuesday
don't
at
want to, but I
7.
could.
Sounds like that's a second choice.
And that would very much be dependent on traffic. If traffic's really bad on that day, I might be here later than 7.
All right. And how about, you can't do the fourth Tuesday of the month? How about,
Okay.
so the third choice might be the third Tuesday of the month?
Third or fourth?
3rd or 4th.
We can't do the fourth Tuesday because that's Historic Review Board. So third Tuesday is our third choice. All right.
Did you say third Tuesday was the third choice? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So just to clarify, our first choice is second Wednesday of the month at 6:30. Second choice is the second Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock. Third choice is third Tuesday of the month. And then time on that one would be 7 or 7
I
o'clock?
think so.
Yes.
She wouldn't be able to make it earlier.
All right. Okay. I will run those by the city recorder and make sure that we don't have any conflicts, and then I'll poll you via email.
Hey, Pete, I got one question. Sometimes there's severe weather and meetings get canceled. How does the city, how would we know that
Yeah.
the meeting was canceled?
Yeah, if the meeting's canceled, I'll call everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've got your contact information,
Yeah.
so you can share that. But I'll call everybody. And if there's a cancellation that we can anticipate more than 24 hours in advance, we will put that on the agenda as well, and that sort of thing. Good question. And in general, unless we decide at the prior committee meeting that we're going to skip a meeting or hold it at a different date, we'll try to stick with our regular meeting times unless there's a cancellation. All right. So for the next item, we want to talk about future agenda items. As I mentioned, we're going to have a training on the touchscreen technology, how to run a meeting, and run over the manual for boards and commission procedures. We'll also be discussing our scope of work and activities. The bylaws contain under Article 4 of your bylaws has your scope of activities. And I know that Bob had sent me, no, it was Brian that sent me an email about discussing which of these are, which of our scope of activities can we say that has been accomplished and which do we still need to work on as a committee. And I'm going to provide you with a document for each one of these activities that kind of talks about that in more detail. As I mentioned to Brian, with respect to some of these activities, we are already compliant with them, although there is always ongoing maintenance of what we have on the books. For example, every time we do a comprehensive plan update, we have to make sure that we're current and complying with goals 5, 6, and 7 of the State Land Use Planning Act, which have to do with natural resources, air, water, and land quality, and natural hazards. No, I just lost my resolution here. Those goals are implemented through the city's zoning ordinances and our overlay districts, and I'm going to provide an overview of our zoning code and how those overlay districts work for the purposes of land use review. And then there are other aspects of those goals which don't have anything to do with land use review but have to do with activities of restoration, enhancement, and those sorts of things. So that gets into stream restoration projects that are under the NRC's purview, review of low-impact development standards that the Public Works Department needs to adopt, stormwater permitting, which we are under a stormwater discharge permit into the Willamette and Clackamas rivers, and the city is responsible for implementing best practices in order to monitor to improve the water quality of the discharge into those. We'll probably be looking at our storm water manual in terms of our storm pond maintenance program, and Eric Hand is our storm water facilities manager, and his crews are out maintaining stormwater ponds throughout the city, removing invasive species, keeping the sediment out of the catch basins, and that sort of thing. And I expect that Eric will be before you providing a presentation. Then I would anticipate providing you with a suggested list of 2012 actions. The other item that we currently have in our bylaws is a standing tree subcommittee. The tree subcommittee is tasked with all sorts of items related to urban forest canopy, including maintenance of the street tree list, providing recommendations for reforestation of public lands, including city parks, water quality areas, and that sort of thing. Our current street tree list is somewhat out of date. Does not reflect a lot of the newer species and variety that is available, for example, on the metro lists, and there may also be species on our list that are now considered nuisance species, including Norway maple. So really happy to have an arborist on board, and a lot of people with experience in that.
I'll have to say the park near the 82nd Avenue Old Bridge that's closed has one of the best populations of Norway maple anywhere in the Portland area.
Right. Well, we've got a lot of them growing in planter strips, various hybrids, and we've made 5 or 6 presentations now to various neighborhood associations about the city's ongoing problem with sidewalk lifts and that sort of thing, because the budding property owners are responsible for the maintenance of all the sidewalks and the trees that go in them. So if a tree is removed from the planter strip, it's required to be replaced, and that generally happens when the sidewalk lift is more than a ½ inch or more because of Americans with Disability Act requirements. So Big problem throughout the city, and a lot of the subdivisions that were approved in the 80s and 90s had 3-foot planter strips. There's really insufficient space for those trees to grow in, and they become a problem in a very short time. The process for replacement is run through both planning department for the trees and the public works department for repair of the sidewalks. I'll be making a presentation to you of what we've been presenting to the neighborhood association, so that you can provide more feedback on our presentation, so that we can do a better job and actually come up with a comprehensive policy with respect to these sidewalk tree replacements that is both beneficial to the urban forest canopy and the safety of the sidewalk throughout the city.
Did I hear you say the standing committee still exists, or
Yeah,
not?
it's still, it needs to be staffed up.
I mean, are there members of the standing committee?
No, there aren't. One of our tasks for 2012 will be to put members on that standing subcommittee and have someone serve as the subcommittee liaison to the NRC. And you have the flexibility to choose whoever you want to be as that liaison, and to choose members to help out make those recommendations.
Do you have a numbers goal for how many on it?
Oh, the previous one was how many, Jerry?
There was 8 or 9.
8 or 9?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Were those people all appointed? Those people weren't all appointed by the city council, right?
No, they weren't.
One of our
it's within
members.
your purview. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it must have included people not on this committee.
Well,
then.
one of
Correct.
the members, Bob Nelson, teaches arboriculture at Clackamas Community College, is now retired. He's the one that headed up that committee,
Yeah.
and he was on this committee, so he was that liaison. So,
Right.
just to clarify this, there's been no standing committee action since Bob Nelson.
No, and
Left.
Bruce Nelson and the other members that
Bruce.
we were talking with back in those days.
Okay.
The subcommittee would also be the logical committee to help us complete our application for Tree City USA status. There are 4 requirements for making Tree City USA an ongoing program. You have to have a public tree ordinance. You can also have a private tree ordinance. Oregon City does not have a private tree ordinance that regulates private property except for development review properties. So we have a separate part of code that deals with that. So we do comply with that first requirement. You have to observe Arbor Day and have plantings during Arbor Week and throughout the year. You have to be expanding $2 per capita on tree-related programming. Materials, education, outreach, various things can contribute to that. And we did it.
$2 per tree for every...
$2 per capita.
Oh, per capita, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, right.
Yeah, and so we were already compliant with that in 2009. We have to update those figures. And then you have to have a tree subcommittee, and that's what we lack, or a tree committee. A committee that is reviewing policies related to reforestation and public tree maintenance in Oregon City. We have the ordinance, but we don't have a citizens group that is responsible for both promoting Arbor Day activities and then providing more long-term recommendations on tree policy. So that's a priority.
So what happened to the last group that was doing that?
Well, we started drafting an ordinance, and I think we got to about 6 drafts, and we sent that up to the Planning Commission and City Commission, and we did adopt some of their recommendations into our current version of Chapter 12.08, which is the public tree and community tree part. The heritage tree designation process was adopted as a result of that tree subcommittee's activities, which is the process by which a tree can be nominated for designation as a heritage tree or grove either on public land or private land. And that process is in place, but the NRC is responsible for reviewing submitted nominations and providing a recommendation up the chain to the City Commission in that regard. Since we have that nomination process, we've received 2 nominations very recently, one on public land and one on private property. which I'd be bringing before you in the new year for your review and comment. The City Commission makes a final decision on whether a tree is actually nominated and on private or public property. Staff's role is to sort of provide background on whether that nomination meets the criteria for heritage tree approval. So if a tree is historic due to its rarity, ecological value, value for wildlife habitat, sheer size, or if it's related to a landmark, for example, on the Ainsworth property, and it's been growing on that property for 100 years or so and is worthy of designation. There are some criteria in the code for that. In addition, there's some practical aspects to it as to, if the tree is in good condition, fair condition, and whether or not the owner is willing to have that tree treated by an arborist to resolve any problems related to its condition, because it can be an expensive prospect. The code also provides for a process for removal and replacement if the tree is diseased, dying, or hazardous. But on public land, it's subject to a designation process where we just send the recommendation up to the City Commission. On private land, it requires landowner consent. So that's been in the code now for about 2 years, but no one's actually submitted a nomination until very recently. Yeah. So, are there any other agenda items that you feel need to be put on there? I have review of bylaws.
Yeah. A review of all those foundational documents that we have. And what are we really charged with?
It would be review of our bylaws under the resolution and our ordinance.
It'd be helpful, I think, to understand kind of like the communication channels, like, we do work and we forward recommendations or things, but to be real clear about, like, because I know some stuff we're supposed to forward over to Parks and Recreation, or just understand, like, if we generate products from here, where how many different venues or routes does it go, for further consideration?
Yeah. Well, you're required to meet with PRAC per your bylaws at least once a year. Depending on what recommendations you're making, all your recommendations would be through me as your staff liaison to whatever board you're providing a recommendation to. If you're commenting on a land use application, and my position as staff is to bring you land use applications and provide an overview of those briefly. Your comments are incorporated into the staff report. Land use applications are subject to review to our code, and so staff's going to explain prior to that process what the land use review process consists of and who the decision-making authorities are. In general, all your communications would come through me, and then I would provide a recommendation to whatever body you're wanting to make that recommendation to through me. But it's coming from the Natural Resource Committee. In terms of code changes and policy changes, for example, if we're reviewing public works standards for stormwater, it'll still go through me to Nancy Crashour, our public works director, and depending on what kind of review is going on, if we're making code changes or comprehensive plan amendments, those are subject to public hearing processes. All items are put into the record. So if there's a formal NRC recommendation, it becomes part of the record for whatever the application is. If we are amending our comprehensive plan, which we'll probably be doing in the next few years, that's called a legislative action. of the City Commission, and it has a very large record associated with it, with formal recommendations from the Natural Resources Committee, which you'll need to vote most likely on when those get to a final draft. Other applications are Planning Commission decisions. Those are called Type 3 applications. They're discretionary. Those include things like zone changes, conditional use applications, and master plans. Staff provides a recommendation. The Natural Resource Committee can comment on those. We include your comments in the staff report, and then the Planning Commission will make a final decision on those. So that's very brief. A lot of our land use decisions are what we call limited discretion land use decisions, which are staff level. There's a public comment period and a notice period and a staff report, and if the application is found to meet code, whether it be a subdivision or a site plan and design review application, we can approve it with conditions. If anybody comments on that application during that comment period, they have legal standing to appeal the decision of the city. And those appeals would either go up to the City Commission or they would go to the Land Use Board of Appeals, depending on how they are configured. So we'll be probably having our city attorney come in and do a sort of a Land Use 101 overview to discuss this in more detail with respect to land use. And I'm always here to answer questions like that as well.
I'm going to have to leave early tonight because of another commitment I have tonight. But I'm all in favor of us getting together informally and getting to know each other. And I'd like to do it in December if we could. So I'll leave it up to all of you. I will make myself available.
I think that's something that we also can float around through email on when the best times are.
Brian can keep me posted. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Jerry.
Good to meet you all.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Bye.
So we're going to be reviewing the bylaws. We're going to talk about our work plan. We'll also, be discussing the City Commission's goals and priorities for the remainder of 2012. There's a little booklet I gave you with the City Commission's goals. And the first goal on page 3 is under Build a Sustainable Future is to reactivate the Natural Resource Committee. So congratulations on that one. The milestone that we need to address moving into the new year is the addressing the Cove Peninsula stabilization, erosion, and reforestation of public lands. So I don't know a great deal about the latest assessment of the Cove Peninsula stability. Tony Conkle, our Community Development Director, informed me today that David Evans and Associates had done an assessment recently, and I don't know what their findings were, but we're going to come before you and talk about that in more detail. With respect to erosion and reforestation of public lands, that'll all fold into our review of our street tree policy, our natural resource overlay district, which governs protection of wetlands, Title III streams, and Title 13 habitat under Metro. We call it the NROD for short, Natural Resource Overlay District. It's compliant with Title 3 and 13. Title 13 is both a regulatory program and an incentive-based program. The part that's really missing from our Title 13 policies is the incentive-based restoration on private lands. We can regulate through the land use process, mitigation, and actually improve the quality and condition of our stream and wetland buffers. But in terms of actively going out and improving public lands outside of the public and private lands outside of the land use process, that's an opportunity for all of the departments in the NRC to work on as we move forward. There are several stream enhancement projects that have been going on. You're probably aware of. The Natural Resource Committee had been doing quite a bit of restoration along Abernathy Creek. Solve has also been working on tributaries to Abernathy Creek near Anchor Way and down off of Redland Road on a private property, Trila Industries. The Public Works Department actively goes out and does stream planning projects on their storm drainage easements as well, which a lot of times there's an overlap between a wetland and a Title III stream and a storm drainage easement. So Eric Hand is aware of that process as well. But it can always be enhanced and improved. There are grants available through Metro specifically for restoration projects. The city has two funding sources. There is for grants, there's the Metro Enhancement Board, which can provide grants for these types of projects, as well as the Civic Enhancement Grant Project. Depending on whether the project is on private land and has owner consent, we can pursue those grants with private landowners.
There is actually more sources than that, but it
Oh, I'm
depends
sure.
on wildlife and things like that, how much it would be actually. If there's fish involved, it's actually much easier.
Yeah.
If you can get salmon in that creek.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we would benefit from in terms of what our current inventory is what is the aquatic habitat condition of some of our streams. Right now, our code talks about intermittent and perennial streams having certain types of buffers, but we don't know. Since 1999, when the first Shapiro local wetland inventory was done, there hasn't been a citywide update of that information. Only through the land use process, when a landowner is required to provide an updated assessment of the wetland or stream on their property and delineate that, do we know is that information updated?
Another thing is fish passage barriers, culverts and so on that keep fish from moving up.
Right. Again, Eric and John Lewis in Public Works are going to need to get your input on that.
Pete,
Yeah.
one thing has a really big impact with invasive species, and I'm thinking both kind of like nutria, which are non-native species and impact upon riparian habitats, and then you got things like reed canary grass and knotweed and a bunch of other species. Would there be any opportunity for us to have any input? Because the problem is, if you have reed canary grass, even like on private property, there's nothing that really keeps that from spreading downstream to other public and private properties.
Right.
Nutria are pretty mobile too.
There is projects on invasive species. They're tending to focus on ones that are new and can be impacted heavily. Things like canary grass is so widely established, it's a really hard one to stop because it's already there everywhere. And there's very little habitat for it to spread to that it hasn't already spread to. And it's very unfortunate. And in parks, you can make an effort in that park, but there's things like garlic mustard or lesser celandine that are only in limited areas right now, and if you can get those areas, you will really make a big impact. And that's the way things are being approached at the government level right now, pretty much.
There's even a problem with the nutria burrow into the banks, so even where you have good riparian habitat, the trees get undermined and wash into the creek, and you could lose a lot of years' investment. We don't really have control over the nutria.
Just remind everybody to speak into the mics. We have a nuisance plant list. So we've said these are nuisance plants. Probably needs to be updated as well. And then in terms of how that is enforced. Most of the complaints in the city are resolved through the code enforcement department. So if you have a layperson who knows that, Reed canary grass is a problem and sees it growing on someone's property, that is probably the least proactive way to go after this problem. However, that's the way the city operates due to staffing and budget resources. Doing eradication, clearly, if we have landowner consent and can work with them on that, like Solve is doing, we will totally support those projects, and they don't need any special approval from the city to do that. But I don't believe we've got a clear and active nuisance plant eradication program for the city. And with respect to animals, like nutria, we're sort of lacking in knowledge and resources in that area as well. So that is a good potential goal. I'd spoken with Sam Leininger at the district about that, and he would be a valuable resource through Eric as well. So, let's see. I don't have much more to add at this point. I think what I'll do is summarize the discussion and put everything in writing. Send it to you via email, and we will we'll clarify which of those dates work for everybody, and I'll get a sort of a informal poll through email about the future agenda items, and get that hammered out ahead of time. Looks like, what did people think about meeting in December?
Well, as long as it's not immediately around Christmas
Yeah.
or right before New Year's, it should be okay.
I would probably think, before Christmas, because, you get people traveling with families, and between Christmas and New Year's, you probably have a hard time catching people.
Are we talking the informal meeting, or is this
Most likely that sounds like it would be a good candidate for an informal meeting.
right? Because that would give us a chance. Because then when we reconvene in January, we would have
Yeah.
a better understanding of
Yeah.
Sure.
picking chair, vice chair, secretary.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great idea. I think we should probably just do that and then settle on a time and a place so that we can notice it. And then we will have elections as well at our first meeting in January to be determined. Great. Is there any other questions at this point?
The citizen comment over?
Perhaps.
Welcome.
Do you live in the city?
If there are
I
no
don't
other...
recognize you. Are you sure
We're
you're a resident?
almost wrapped up here, unless you guys want to talk about anything else. Okay.
I would comment that I'd be willing to, if people have the time, I'd be willing to go out to a local restaurant or something right after this, if anybody's willing to do that right now. So,
I'm afraid I don't, but
I don't either.
thanks.
yeah, well, I was expecting that. I'll go down anyway.
Commissioner Nocita, do you have anything you'd like to add? This is pretty informal.
Yeah, I know. I should have come earlier.
Working.
Actually, I have a question on land use plans, I guess. Is it your intent that we would review these, all of them? Or do we ask to review certain ones?
Let's look at what our current bylaws say about that. activity number 9 on page 3, and I think this is what is in the code as well, says, the NRC may comment. I think it's a little more elaborate in the actual city code, but the NRC can comment on land use applications that have the potential to significantly impact natural resources and related projects and policies coming before the city commission. The best way for the staff to provide you an overview of it's somewhat subjective what is significantly impact. So
Is that kind of proactive, or do we kind of come to staff saying we think it's going to have impact, or does staff come to us?
I think the best way would be we would provide notice of land use applications to the NRC regardless of whether it may significantly impact or not. And then if it's a natural resource overlay district issue, I think we would always include, we would always welcome your comments on that. If it has to do with significant tree removal, subject to Chapter 1741 and what level of mitigation is being proposed by the applicant on a private property outside of the Natural Resource Overlay District. That's another candidate. Anything that's near a wetland, Title III stream, or significant habitat the city has adopted, which is Natural Resource Overlay District, that would be potentially it as well. City capital improvement plans, which are typically amendments to our comprehensive plan, such as the water system, sewer master plan, and stormwater plan. Those would be candidates for comment as well. Currently, we're going through a water master plan update. Has not been recommended for approval yet by the Planning Commission. The ultimate decision will be the City Commission on that. So that's still in the record on that plan is still open. So we'll need to. I'll provide a summary of where that's at an upcoming meeting, and I would do this as a standard agenda item, kind of overview of land use applications, and provide you the file names. Most of the information on those we try to upload to the websites, so you can look at those at your leisure. Under the submitted applications section, but what I used to do in the past is facilitate that by sending you the link to the web page, which had all the information on it. Our web has capacity to store some really large files on it, so it's only limited by the speed of your connection, kind of thing. I try to keep them as small as possible, so you can download that stuff. Those are subject to land use approval criteria, so it's important to be cognizant of what that approval criteria is, so that you're not being arbitrary in what you say with respect to those applications. Because under state law, if an application is deemed to meet the criteria or can meet it through a certain condition of approval, then it should be approved, so we'll be going over that when we go over land use applications in more detail. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we'll basically send you everything.
Yeah, you're going to.
But I'll try to distill it down.
Pete, I had one question under 12 where you talk about kind of coordinating with PRAC.
Yeah.
Do they develop a work plan at a certain time of year? Because it seems
They
like
do.
we're trying to do something kind of like in sync with them. It'd be kind of helpful to know when they're kind of putting their work plans together.
Yeah. I'll need to coordinate with Scott Archer, who's our Community Services Director, and he is the liaison to PRAC, to see when their first meeting's going to be in January and when they're going to be discussing their work plan. And if any members want to come to that meeting, or any members of the PRAC want to come to this meeting, we can certainly facilitate that, and the sooner the better, it sounds like. particularly with respect to the goals we were talking about earlier with respect regarding reforestation on public lands, that pertains to parkland as well. And the PRAC will need to be part of that coordination since there's active ball fields, passive recreation areas that have specific needs for where you can and can't plant trees for their needs, but at the same time we have natural resource overlay district which encourages native reforestation in some of our parks because they're within that district. For example, Clackamas Park is entirely within the natural resource overlay district. That means that only native species of plants can be planted in that park. So you've got interesting conflicts there because sometimes you get large cottonwoods and those sorts of things that are either for safety reasons in the right of way and those kinds of things. And so we should coordinate with the PRAC on those. Another park that's entirely within the Natural Resource Overlay District is Singer Creek, and I believe Waterboard Park as well, which is the park behind the Public Works facility on Center Street. There are maybe one other, but I'll have to check with you. Yeah.
Singer Creek had a huge infestation last spring of lesser celandine, only on half the park, but it was like solid cover for 100 feet at a time on that half.
What's that?
It's a little ephemeral spring plant, comes up, covers everything, blooms, and dies down within a couple of months.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's very invasive, and it was very clear there because it was just one valley out of the two in that park had it. The other one had nothing. But where it was just everywhere.
Is it an annual or?
It's a perennial. But it's it does its whole life cycle in the spring, then dives down to the roots.
Right.
It's there's a couple of invasives that have that pattern, and we have some natives that have that pattern too.
Yeah.
But it's one of the more spectacular ones because it's so brief, 2 or 3 months, and in the summer it's gone again.
Pete, I understand there's actually black-tailed deer in Singer Park. They're reported from time to time. I think it's kind of curious just about the potential impacts. Obviously, you have deer in the park and surrounded by roads and things. You have concerns about traffic and public safety and wildlife in a pretty small area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think that we have active wildlife corridors throughout the city and in some of these locations. I think the majority of them are concentrated along the streams, obviously. We kind of just handle that as it happens. Public Works primarily, I think, would. And then we have park staff consisting of Larry Potter and Richard Reed. Richard Reed is an arborist. Larry is a arborist. He's got a lot of experience working on maintaining and things like that. They are busy guys. They're maintaining a lot of stuff, but they would also be involved in any wildlife conflicts with traffic and that kind of thing. I don't know to what extent the Traffic Safety Committee has worked on wildlife corridor issues at all. I could check with that. They're the committee that looks at, road safety, pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular. Yeah. Look over the bylaws. I think that what I'll do is provide you a memorandum with where I think we're at and attaining some of these and which ones we need to work on. And then I'll also be providing you a specific suggested list of action plans for 2012 for your review. So thank you very much. And no one has anything else to add. Let's say we were adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.